Hello. As Vice-Chancellor of the University of Sussex, I'm delighted to be speaking to you from the Attleborough Centre of Creative Arts, welcoming you to the inaugural Sussex Festival of Ideas. The new Sussex Festival of Ideas has been developed by a team of staff and students from the School of Media, Arts and Humanities, led by this year's Artistic Director, Professor Mary Krell. The School of Media, Arts and Humanities is a hub for creativity, critical thinking, debate and scholarship, and the practice of art. It is a place where students study the humanities, arts, media and languages. They're inspired by teachers who are leading researchers in these fields. It's a place where they make films, music, drama, and work in cutting-edge interactive media and arts computing. And they're led by our brilliant staff, who are scholars, critical thinkers, and internationally recognised practitioners. The breadth and the excitement of this work comes through in this festival's programming. It shows how ideas and debates in the arts can speak to those most urgent issues of our time, including identity, activism, and the role of the digital in cultural expression and communication during and beyond COVID. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Kate O'Riordan, Professor of Digital Culture and Dean of the School of Media, Arts and Humanities here at Sussex. Over her career, Kate has examined the ways that media, arts and humanities are foundational to the ways of knowing and making worlds. And her research has been based on collaborative and interdisciplinary ways of working. Kate has published widely on cultures of science, technology and the digital, including Unreal Objects in 2017 and The Genome Incorporated in 2010, together with Furious, Technological Feminism and Digital Futures, with Professors Caroline Bassett and Sarah Kemba. She's currently working on sexuality and the algorithmic imaginary, on biotechnologies and on LGBTQ+ identities. Kate's vision for the media, arts and humanities at Sussex is interdisciplinary, experimental and inclusive, and it's reflected in her talk this evening. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
This talk is the closing event of the Sussex Festival of Ideas. The festival was the inaugural event for the new School of Media, Arts and Humanities, and my talk reflects on the school and the festival. It's also an academic talk in the traditional sense and gives me an opportunity to outline my own vision for these areas based on my research and experiences of the field. After a brief reflection on the festival, I'll set out an agenda for the humanities as concerned and engaged with environment, politics and people. I'll also use this to make a claim for media, arts and humanities as making realities, as practices of doing, making and materialising in the world. Media forms make realities. The festival was imagined as a way for students, alumni and staff to work across the new school in new ways, and I've learned a huge amount from engaging with staff and students in this work. It has also been a wonderful chance to showcase the work of the school and to build on relationships with other institutions. As a way of working together, it's been fantastic to see this materialise, and the festival has helped build the school as an interdisciplinary, experimental and inclusive platform for media, arts and humanities. The festival has brought together elements across the school, across these domains, and demonstrated the school's strengths in critical and creative work and its synthesis of practice theory. It's been interdisciplinary in the sense of bringing together disciplines, and more importantly, in working across these disciplines to create new syntheses and the kind of interventions that matter. For example, journalist Clive Myrie launched the festival by sharing his experiences of political situations and the responsibility of representing those to others, as part of a reflection on the importance of media, arts and humanities in global politics, and the contribution that the University of Sussex has made through its students and alumni is one of its real strengths. The festival has been experimental in the sense of the experiment as a mode of exploring new ways of working, experimental as a way of creating a new productive apparatus, and experimental as a contact zone for new relations and different encounters. It's been inclusive in the sense of bringing together students, alumni, and community and staff. The events throughout the festival highlight critical and creative practices as modes of inclusion, creating interdisciplinary spaces, curating conversations, and co-creating participation and voice. Experiencing the festival has enabled, for me at least, an immersion in the strengths of these areas, in making sense of the world, bringing people together, and in capacity building for political intervention. Work with archives, museums, literature, filmmaking, and music has brought issues such as Brexit, racism, homelessness, and the exclusion of young people from politics and education into focus. This work has also brought the community's cultural practices and industries to the centre and front. Media arts and humanities at Sussex have the capacity to co-create spaces within the institution and within national cultural institutions more broadly, to intervene in questions of social justice, to make sense of the world, and to make culture matter. Media arts and humanities at Sussex are material, world-making interventions that matter. Interdisciplinarity, the experiment, and inclusion are the ruling motifs of the school. And critical and creative practice cuts across all of our endeavour. Our work is in the making of texts, objects, practices, spaces, and communities. And the critical and creative practices of thinking, writing, making, and imagining are at the heart of what we do in the school. Throughout the pandemic, the importance of people, culture, and creativity has been underscored. People have read more, listened more, watched more, and engaged in cultural practices and communities. At the same time, the impacts of COVID-19 on everyone, on communities, on practices, on the ability to come together, and in the cancelling of live and in-person events of all kinds has been devastating. The impact of Brexit on the UK arts and cultural sectors has already been felt, as even without the pandemic, barriers to international community are newly arising. Access to arts and humanities education is also under threat in the UK, particularly in England, not least from government policy itself. The capacity for the University of Sussex to sustain media, arts and humanities is simultaneously more at risk as it becomes more vital. In these conditions, the capacity to hope for, and to imagine and to build a strong platform for an experimental, interdisciplinary and inclusive media, arts and humanities is crucial. Why experiment? Many of my own colleagues are ambivalent about drawing on experimental as a way of talking about media, arts and humanities. Some of them feel it's a term from the sciences and that we need to articulate our own strengths. Others feel that it's overused to the point where it loses meaning or stands in for preserving a primarily white elite avant-garde. One of my colleagues has written extensively on the experimental in relation to literature in the USA, and her scholarship points to the anxiety around the use of the term experimental, where it is seen as an attempt to legitimize the politics of knowledge in the arts and humanities in a time of crisis by borrowing from the sciences. After all, the sciences are more credible and they have more expensive stories. She also explores a recuperation of the term by exploring experimental as an embodiment of virtues in knowledge production, rather than experiment as method. This work on the literature of the USA as experimental also embodies an experimental mode itself, bringing science studies through literature and vice versa. Representing and intervening topics in the philosophy of natural science, written by Ian Hacking in the 1980s, comes into this discussion of literature. And this, by the way, is a motif of my talk, to jump from one text to another because they reference each other. People referencing other people's work provides a citational map to follow or to challenge. So a segue through Hacking leads me to Karen Barad, because Hacking and Barad are writing in relation to each other, and the other way. Hacking is informed by feminist science studies and feminist science studies has been a generative ground for experimental genealogies. Barad develops an approach to understanding the world through the philosophy of science, which examines how representation, or what she calls discursive practices, materialize bodies in the world. Barad draws on the work of Judith Butler and Donna Haraway. And in case you were wondering about this traversal through science, these are philosophers all, for whom science is part of the terrain of thinking. Karen Barad develops an experimental mode of the humanities through a theory of the apparatus and a gentle cut, which is essentially an argument about how to take responsibility for creating some realities and not others. Others of my colleagues write about and enact and perform music as experimental modes. And I'm going to bounce from philosophy through music to another reference, which is the software arts, a book by Warren Sack at the University of California, Santa Cruz, something of a kind of sister college. And the software arts is a useful point to alight in this flight between texts. Because, like feminist science studies, Sack inverts the idea that the experiment is carried from science into the arts and constructs a vision of computer science driven by the arts and the artisanal, a vision which has particular salience for Sussex. The University of Sussex was founded on a principle of access to education, but also a principle that arts and sciences work together. Undergraduates in the arts in its founding degrees took science subjects, and scientists took art subjects. This model hasn't wholly survived at Sussex, although the current refresh of the curriculum and work around sustainability and climate offer opportunities to revisit this. It is rare when a rich and truly challenging arts and science mix is executed well. To return to the humanities' anxiety about borrowing from science, another genealogy of the university and the disciplines themselves lends itself to a history in which the language of the experiment is as much from the arts and humanities as natural sciences, and a history of knowledge production through the universities in which philosophy appears as the founding discipline of both. Experiment is linked to experience, practice, observation, and making. And experimental humanities can be curious, engaged, and inquiring, outward-facing and open to challenge, as well as to the discipline of technical and artistic practice. It has an agenda too. A strong media arts and humanities platform can address three intersecting layers of global crisis. Ecologically, climate crisis both defines and is caused by current conditions. Infrastructurally, politics have reached a critical point as states, corporations, and institutions compete, form chaotic networks, and exercise unprecedented methods of surveillance and control. And individually and collectively, what it is to be human has been challenged and reconfigured in relation to these forces, to biotechnology, datafication, and pandemic. The school's goal is thus reflexive and responsive, to transform the humanities epistemologically, to transform the world ontologically, knowing and being. Knowledge about how humans make meaning and make life meaningful is crucial to materializing future worlds. Contemporary human life is mediated through climactic forces, power and information structures, and biotechnologies. Rather than undergo internal reformation, the arts and humanities increasingly face outwards across institutions, cultures, and disciplines to reconfigure themselves as a force for global public change. Media arts and humanities must be reimagined as the experimental and creative arts of the possible. From this transformed foundation, the experimental humanities strive to restore sustainability in the world, generative governance, and trust in people, bodies, and health. If technology, media, and communication incite the problem, they also catalyze the solution. It's the job of the experimental humanities to rethink these meaning-making channels and media forms as platforms for stabilization. And the school's vision is to pursue this reparative mission through the following themes. Firstly, the ecological world in climate crisis. The ecological humanities as a critical and creative practice is a generative site for enabling hope and intervention. It seeks to understand how high-tech futurism both causes and mitigates climate crisis. It sets out a framework for understanding and contributing to the possible conditions for climate justice. Experiments in the arts and humanities can provide new interfaces for sustainable futures from as unlikely sources as didactic global television programming to green media and arts interventions in schools. The second layer is that of politics, corporations, and nationalism. Media arts and humanities are the site of politics, and contemporary media cultures both democratize and obscure, creating the conditions that foster forms of populism and fascism, at the same time as providing the site of intervention and activism. We look at how publics and politics are produced and sustained in delegated, co-produced, and digitally mediated worlds. We examine the possible conditions of justice when societies are reconfigured through machine learning, AI, and delegated technologies. Media arts and humanities enable creative interfaces and enable agency, autonomy, and justice within these systems, as well as being part of the problem. The third layer is the human subject, pandemic and technology. Life itself has been reconfigured through climatic and political crisis, information and biotechnology. Corporate ownership and data-driven health systems have reshaped capacities for care in new ways. Media arts and humanities can identify and develop ethical interfaces for understanding these transformations to sustain individual and public health. The experiment as an approach, a site of contact, an ethos, is a modality of humanism and creativity. Its association with scientific practice also acts as a boundary object to connect across disciplines and discourses. As such, media arts and humanities are powerful sites of connection and contact. They offer a means to calibrate interdisciplinary research along material, pragmatic, and speculative lines. These three areas, ecology and climate, politics and communication, and the human subject, encompass an urgent political agenda for our times. Media arts and humanities at Sussex offer an attunement to the historical and a critical and creative care for the present and future. The school brings the capacity of these fields to meet these challenges and to learn from each other, from students, staff, and alumni in collective world-making practices. These areas, these subjects are material practices, interventions, and they make material worlds. I drew earlier on Karen Barad and other feminist science studies thinkers to illustrate some of the ways to think about how representation, media practices, or discursive practices materialize bodies in the world. There are many ways of thinking about the argument that media, arts, and cultural forms make things in the world. It is central to my understanding of these fields that they're not merely representations or symbolic forms, but material artifacts, practices, and forms of world-making. It's a basic premise of teaching in media arts and humanities that we know very little without media and cultural forms. Knowledge is constructed through direct experience, which is limited, and through media forms, which are almost infinite. People understand identities, nations, and societies through media forms. People only ever meet or know a relatively small number of people compared to the publics that are understood to make up communities, and only ever travel to a fraction of the places understood as the known world. Emotion, meaning, and identity are brought to us and made and remade through media forms. In order to play through this assertion that media, arts, and humanities make material bodies, I'm going to use one example from my own work, the making of mammoths. And yes, I mean mammoths, the extinct, charismatic megafauna of the Pleistocene era. No one alive has ever seen a mammoth as an actual living organism. They became extinct between 10 and 4,000 years ago. However, they did coexist with humans. Cave paintings that were drawn when mammoths could be seen by humans do exist. For example, the Cave of the Mammoths near Bordeaux in southern France. According to National Geographic and the Smithsonian, the oldest known artwork in the North Americas is a picture of a mammoth carved onto a mammoth bone 13,000 years ago. Since then, people of every era have contributed to a visual culture of mammoths across media of all kind and in all kinds of genres: factual, fictional, animated, and filmic. Although I can't find any recorded mammoths in Byzantine art. Factual genres draw on skeleton remains, fossils, and artwork, but they also draw on fictional techniques to create a realist aesthetic such that people imagine that they have seen mammoths as they existed and as though they had existed in more contemporary eras. And in fact, rumours of mammoth sightings continue to circulate, often with purported media footage to support them. The way that mammoths appear is updated along with changes in media technologies and modes of representation. News stories and documentaries about mammoths and about mammoth remains are illustrated with and animated by mammoths as though they were alive, and they are a familiar cultural motif, even though they haven't been seen by people in a live form for at least 4,000 years. They have never been photographed or filmed, but they appear as though they had been through animation, simulation, and special effects, all of which are speculative and fictional. The animation of Manny the mammoth from the film Ice Age has as much of a relation to a live mammoth as any other image. And because of the popularity and recognition of the character, Manny is also used to illustrate news stories about mammoths. Mammoths are news, in fact. There have been thousands of news stories in the UK broadsheets in the last 3 years about mammoths. They are still news in 2021, despite everything else. Mammoth stories have largely circulated variations on the story of de-extinction or mammoth cloning. Bids to create a mammoth-like being exist in the life sciences and are part of broader fields of synthetic biology, genomics, and genetic engineering, which comprise de-extinction. De-extinction is big. Meetings and networks convened through the Revive and Restore Foundation bring together a global community of people invested in de-extinction. George Church's Mammoth Project is part of this de-extinction network. A combination of ancient DNA, Asian elephant cloning, and contemporary genetic editing techniques, especially CRISPR, make versions of mammoth making feasible. Although the biomedia of tissue samples, DNA, and genomics are crucial, this is also where mammoth imaginaries play an important part in the reconstruction of the mammoth. The mammoth is imagined as inhabiting Siberian landscapes, specifically tundra, and to look like this, more or less. In fact, George Church is looking at short tusks to make the animal poacher-proof. And this maps onto other mammoth imaginaries in which mammoths don't appear to have large tusks at all. However, woolly coats, resistance to the cold, and tundra-forming mammoths are part of the de-extinction imaginary. And this is where the compelling and mimetic power of media cultures of mammoths come into play. The success of the Mammoth De-Extinction Project will not lie in the successful sequencing of the mammoth genome. It will lie in the expression of a phenotype that looks like a mammoth. The making of a visual culture of mammoths makes mammoth making recognizable, not so much as charismatic megafauna, so much as necrofauna. Britt Ray's book on the ethics of de-extinction is called The Rise of the Necrofauna and points to other charismatic species in the de-extinction project. This and other popular science writing in the de-extinction area contribute to the visual culture of extinct species and are at the same time parts of the ways in which species are being made across multiple media forms. The high-tech imaginaries of emerging technologies that might make de-extinction possible are a possible future. With enough investment and attention, anything is possible. However, the key argument to register here is that the science is only part of this picture. Biotechnology might synthesize a mammoth genome, and a genotype is an organism's complete set of genetic material, and this could be used to be generative of a mammoth-like organism if vectored through the Asian elephant, which is the nearest genetic relation to the mammoth. However, genetic authenticity is not what is at stake. Any such organism would have to look like the cultural expectations of the mammoth. And we know that genotype doesn't determine phenotype, and genes are expressed in relation to multiple environmental factors. So a mammoth genome, a mammoth doesn't make. An animal that looks like a mammoth does a mammoth make. In order for mammoth de-extinction to be understood as actually possible or credible, it is more important that the resulting offspring looks like a mammoth. And this is where we come back to media, to arts and humanities. The imaginary of what a mammoth looks like has been constructed through thousands of years of mediation, of pictures, paintings, films, animations, and narratives, such that this makes possible what would be understood as the return of a mammoth out of time. Media make bodies in the world. Discursive practices form material bodies. Media, arts, and humanities make beings in the world and are world-making. In a world in which mammoths can be rendered from biotechnology and mediation, anything seems possible. So then, with such potential in the hands of the human, then do not attention and investment in the possible also lend themselves to other realities? To return to the vision of the school of an experimental humanities, if anything is possible, let us turn such powers to address a broad agenda for social justice, for inclusion, to address the ecological world in climate crisis, to address politics, corporations, and nationalism, to address the challenges to the human subject, pandemic, and technology. Here is another leap to other mammals, to humans, we are mammals, and to marine mammals, not extinct, but nearly, not extinct, but undrowned. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, writing about emergent strategy in relation to Black feminism, offers an alternative way of thinking about wonder or experiment, environment, and politics. In Undrowned Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, the name of her book, Gumbs asks readers to consider existing species, some of them close to extinction, to listen to them and to their tenuous and precarious relation to life, and to the ways in which human investment in human conditions endangers other beings in the world. Rather than the necrotic politics of bringing back the dead, Gumbs surfaces complex histories of racism, murder, and survival, and suggests that an experimental disposition towards animal and non-human animal relations in the present and the past teaches a productive route to future worlds for a politics of hope. She also suggests that we listen. How can we listen across species, across extinction, across harm? How does echolocation, the practice many marine mammals use to navigate the world through bouncing sounds, change our understandings of vision and visionary action? Is social media already a technology of bounce, of throwing something out there and seeing what comes back? This is where we start our trans-species communion, opening a space to uplift the practice of listening, even more than the practices of showing and proving and speaking up. Listening is not only about the normative ability to hear, it is a transformative and revolutionary resource that requires quieting down and tuning in. Several of my colleagues work on the politics and practices of listening to bats, birds, robots, and people. Kate Lacey argues that a politics of listening offers an ethical subjectivity, perhaps more compelling than the politics of being seen and being seen to be right. Thank you for listening to my appropriations, borrowings, and tangential connections across texts, peoples, thoughts, and ideas. My argument is that media, arts, and humanities make realities, that this festival is a celebration of connective practices and hope in difficult times. The realities of every era are made in the media, arts, and humanities of their time, whether that is the tesserae of Byzantine art, which shows us dragons and winged lions, or the animation of mammoths over centuries, or the tweets of social media that make politics. The media, arts, and humanities of every era make their realities. They are world-making in their time and out of time. To come back to the broad commitments of the school, to address environment, politics, and people, and to meet the urgency of the challenge, media, arts, and humanities must be reimagined as the experimental and creative arts of the possible. Thank you for listening.